of Notre Dame, where we had spent yesterday. And the steeple was still standing when we arrived on the block, and in flames. It went from white into a kind of a golden hue, and there were black clouds as well. And it burned and burned, and there was a stunned disbelief, and then it turned to utter sadness. We had crowds around me, and the Pantheon is behind me, people crying, and we watched the steeple fall. It was just incredibly tragic, and it's an amazing scene. It's very emotional here. People are very upset. People are, of course, have their cell phones up and filming this, but it's a state of shock here. It's quite amazing.
I can only imagine what it's like watching there in person. We know what we're seeing on television here, and it has been awful to watch. And we are now hearing that the cathedral sits on an island. Police are now telling us that that entire island is being evacuated. One would presume that we don't know whether that involves firefighters or not. If it did, that would set them back even further. But look at the pictures that we've seen. Can we go back to that wide view if we could for a moment, please? This is what you're looking at tonight. If you're living in Paris or if you're visiting Paris, smoke consuming the sky, one of the world's most famous buildings that is so meaningful to so many, burning. The roof of Notre Dame has collapsed, the spire has collapsed, and firefighters are doing anything they can to prevent any further damage. Notre Dame Cathedral, again, was under a $6 million renovation. That's been taking place for some time now, and as Elaine Cobb, who's on the scene there in Paris, has noted ably, that they've tried to keep normal traffic going throughout the cathedral as this construction project has taken place. A very delicate and very difficult one, because you're talking about parts of this cathedral, the wood, other pieces of it being 800 years old. And that's what they've been trying to update as we rejoin Elaine Cobb and as the president of France arrives on the scene, Elaine.
Yes, Emmanuel Macron has now arrived at Notre Dame Cathedral. He's accompanied by the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe. They are making their way to near the scene, or as near as they can safely get, because, of course, the danger is of the church collapsing onto people or onto nearby buildings. So we're hearing the entire Ile de la Cité, that entire island, is being evacuated at the moment by police and by firefighters, because they are concerned of the fire spreading rapidly if it takes hold of anywhere beside the cathedral.
So Ile de la Cité, talk about that, Elaine. If that is, and in fact it is being evacuated, how many buildings, how many shops, how many people, how many blocks are we talking about?
Well, the Ile de la Cité has, in fact, a church. The courthouse is just across the road. It, however, is far enough that it should be all right. But there's a hospital just beside the church. It's just one block over, and they are being evacuated. They're also right beside it. There are narrow streets with a lot of restaurants and cafes and souvenir shops, and all of that has been cleared. They're trying to get everybody out of the apartment buildings there. They're all very old buildings, so there will be a lot of wood, a lot of old stone, and because they're all packed in on top of each other, the fear is that if the fire jumped across the very narrow streets, that it could start a major blaze in several of those buildings, buildings which are home to people who live there all year round, as well as to the cafes and restaurants that people visit when they are visiting Paris.
Elaine, when was this construction project supposed to be finished?
It was due to be finished sometime later this year or next year, but it was something that it took some delays already. So they were looking for $70 million for the urgent renovations, and had hoped, in fact, to then go on and do some other works if they had managed to get any more funding. But the urgent renovations were due to wrap up later this year or next year on this 12th century cathedral that hasn't seen any major renovation in some time, and that's why they said it really needed the work. It really had to be done very quickly. They had said that the repairs, the initial repairs were urgent because it was literally falling apart with pieces of stone falling off. And at the back of the cathedral, they have what they've called the graveyard, which is where the pieces of stonework, where gargoyles for statues are all stored, that have fallen off the building.
Yeah, as you point out, it was crumbling. Anybody who visited Paris could easily see that. But this has been a big point of discussion in Paris for quite some time, Elaine, about what to do about Notre Dame and how to fix it.
Absolutely, and part of the issue has been that the cathedral is, there are several organizations involved. It is part of the church, but it is also part of the city. And the French government had pledged to cover 50 million euros of the cost of repairs, but the church said they needed to raise really 150 million more over 10 years. And they had been hoping to really get to work on it and fix it, which they have been doing, to get the urgent stuff out of the way. But they have said, you know, that was still only going to make sure it was just all right. The whole effort involved a lot of different people, a lot of different organizations, including France's National Monuments Body, and also appealed to private individuals, including in the U.S., hoping to get people who love Paris, who love Notre Dame of Paris, to actually give some money and help in those vital repairs.
And talk about Elaine, talk about the cathedral living there. Talk about the cathedral itself, the structure, and what people are seeing right now. The buildings and the island itself.
Well, what they're seeing right now is just flames. We've been told that the entire structure is on fire. It's not just the roof, it is the entire church. Don't forget, as well as the wood in the structure itself, there are all the wooden pews. There is the wood involved in there are wall hangings, there are separation areas, where the choir sits, all of that is wooden. There is just so much wood in there to go on fire. There are also tapestries and artworks, and it's just highly flammable. The church itself it's a thing of beauty, or was, and people would visit. It was always on people's lists of things to see in Paris because it's at the heart of the city, both geographically and emotionally. It's where people would gather. It's where people go to pray. It's where people who don't even go to pray would visit the church on Easter week or around Christmas for carol singing, for services. And it's a place that's always been very special to people, and it's known around the world, whether it's those who loved Victor Hugo's Hunchback of Notre Dame, or if it's people who love architecture because of its very pure Gothic architecture. It's been such a huge part of Paris and indeed of France, and there are a lot of emotional responses and tweets out at the moment, not just from politicians and mayors and dignitaries, but from ordinary French people who can't believe that this famous landmark in Paris is crumbling away before everyone's eyes, and that spire that stands so tall, even though it's in the lowest part of the city, that is a bowl, but it was visible from pretty much everywhere. And so to think that will no longer be visible, it's just tearing people apart here. It's breaking their hearts.
All right, Elaine, thank you. No one forgets the first thing, myself included, the first time they saw Notre Dame, and to see it burn is difficult to watch. Even more difficult for those on the scene, including Victoria Woodall, who's a reporter with our station in Philadelphia, KYW. Victoria, where are you, and what are you seeing from your position?
Hi, Jeff. Well, right now, I've been staying in the Latin Quarter on vacation, and we are on the balcony of an Airbnb that we're staying at. And what we're looking at right now is if we were facing the Notre Dame, we would be on the right-hand side of the bell tower, on the other side of the Seine. And I think what's so emotional right now is I can hear people in the streets singing. They're singing and praying and watching this billowing fire continue to persist, and now within the belly of the church. This has been going on for a few hours now, at least 2 hours. My husband and I, we were walking around this beautiful city, and we see this billowing of yellow, dark smoke, and we're like, what could that possibly be? We start moving more towards the direction of our area in the Latin Quarter of where we are, and we see it is the Notre Dame in flames. It looks like it started on the back end. It still has not reached those bell towers, but what we've been watching is the emergency team trying their best to put this fire out, but the wind is also very serious, and I think that's what continues to be so disheartening because they're fighting so hard. But the wind is one obstacle that is for sure working against them, but it's extremely disheartening, Jeff. I mean, the crowds in the streets, they are glued to what they're watching. The singing in the street they're songs of prayer. I don't think anyone around the world can imagine what we're seeing before us right now. It's unbelievably disheartening, Jeff. Unbelievable.
Well, we get one sense of it here watching on television, but it's a completely different one being there and hearing what you're saying about what people are doing right now. That singing on the streets, that praying, that hoping that something changes here after this awful afternoon in Paris. Tony Headley is also there. Tony, are you watching the work that firefighters are able to do right now? Let's try again. Tony Headley, are you with us?
Hi, I'm standing on Rue Saint-Louis, which is right across from Rue de la Cité, where Notre Dame is still in flames. Firemen on top of tall trucks, tall ladders, are dousing the fire, which is at the furthest eastern end of Notre Dame, which is in the center of Paris. Thousands of people are standing by in shock. They're not making much noise. The only noise you can hear is that of the firemen's trucks and sirens arriving. I asked one of the bystanders, and he explained to me that this was the loss of the symbol of Christianity in Europe. And although it might be rebuilt, this is what we were witnessing as we speak.
Tony, talk about the work that is. I know the entire island now has been cleared out. Does it look as though people are still leaving, and how far back are they keeping people right now?
New York, can you hear me?
Yes, Tony, we hear you. Go ahead.
New York, can you hear me?
Okay. Guys, there's some connection issues there, I think. So I'd like to go back to Elaine if we could for just a quick moment. Elaine Cobb on the scene for us as well in Paris. What else do you know, Elaine?
Jeff, the Deputy Mayor of Paris has said that Notre Dame has suffered colossal damages, and it seems that the main thrust of work of the firefighters now is to try to save any artworks that they possibly can inside the church. The whole roof, the whole main area is down. What is still standing are the two towers in the front, those twin square towers, and some of the very back of the church, which faces onto the river at the back of the Ile de la Cité. But the entire center, the top half at least, is gone, and the fire now inside the structure, and therefore hitting all of the pews, all of the wooden artworks, all of the wooden framing inside the building, because of course it's a very large cathedral, and it's in that traditional form with, they've got wooden rings surrounded by wooden panels for the choir and for the priests and for smaller services. So an awful lot of wood inside to catch fire and to spread the fire.
All right, Elaine, thank you very much. And as the sun continues to set here in Paris, it's going to create a sensational and tragic scene in the sky as the flames continue moving up into the air and as firefighters continue to do their work. To update you now on what has been happening and what you've been watching transpire here, Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris has been largely destroyed today by flames that broke out during a massive renovation project. Notre Dame dates back to the 12th century. It is the most visited landmark in Paris. It is one of the most famous churches. It is one of the most famous landmarks in the world. Within the last hour, the spire of Notre Dame collapsed. The roof of Notre Dame, most of the roof of Notre Dame has collapsed. We are still watching all of these pictures come in from Paris as a spokesperson, unfortunately, from the Notre Dame Cathedral tells us everything is burning. We are going to have much more on your local news on this CBS station on this fire in Paris, on our digital network CBSN, and we'll be back with a full report on what is happening in Paris this afternoon on the CBS Evening News. Until then, I'm Jeff Floor, here in New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.